when our ML. That's great. So thank you everyone for joining our 2022 municipal election, our candidate information session. This is something the election management team puts on in an election year just to support the candidates and their journey of candidacy throughout this season. This is number 4 session for me in my career. It's always a highlight of the process to be able to inform our candidates and help with their journey. Next slide. So just to introduce the team, I couldn't do this without the management team that's assisting me. It takes a village. So I'm Tanya Daniels, so I'm the City Clerk and Director of Clerk Services. And then with me tonight, I do have Emma Vokes, who's the Supervisor of Elections, and it's Keaton Scarf, who's the Election Assistant. So they've come on screen here just momentarily. Chris Gauthier is the Deputy Clerk and Manager of Clerk Services. He's also a key member of the election team, and so you may be corresponding with him across your candidacy. So we're going to turn our videos off here just after the introductions, just so that the focus becomes about the slide deck and not about our lovely faces. Next slide. So I'd like to do welcome to some special guests that I'll be assisting with our candidate information session tonight. So we do have Councillor John Utley, so current council member John Utley, who will be going through a bit of what we've called a councillor in a day, and just advising and providing some of his perspective on what it's been like to be on council. Then we have Carol Suave and Jennifer Costria, who are here from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. That's the bulk of what you'll hear from tonight, overviewing the rules and regulations within the Municipal Elections Act. Then we have special guest Jordan Tozer, who's come in from our bylaw enforcement team, who's going to do some information about campaign signage. Next slide. Just a little housekeeping at the very beginning. So this session is virtual. So how we are going to, if you couldn't attend or you'd like to again view this later, you'll be able to do that through the recording, which we'll make available on our website. We will have a bit of a washroom or bio break in about the halfway point, so that's programmed in. And then at the conclusion of each presentation, of time available, we will have a question and answer period, which at the bottom of your screen, about the center, you'll see Q&A button, so you can submit those questions. If we run out of time, staff are monitoring those questions so that we'll be able to follow up with attendees at a later time. Next slide. I guess I just went through this. I should have, let Keaton help me go through the slides a little sooner, so that I wasn't skipping ahead on him. But we'll read the questions out loud to whoever the question is being posed to. So whether it's the ministry rep, Councillor Utley, perhaps one of the election team members at the end, where we'll be answering just some general Brantford election knowledge. And so then again, anything that can't be answered, we will reach out via email after the session. Next slide. So just a little bit about the Brantford election. So we've just come off of a provincial election. It was a little bit different than a municipal in the fact that we have a potential for 25 different types of ballots. So not only are we actually running the municipal office election, we are also conducting 4 different school board elections. So they're listed here. Different offices are available. So the mayor is 1 to be elected at large. Then we have 5 councillors through our wards 1 through 5, 2 to be elected per ward. And then 4 trustees for the Grand Erie District School Board, 2 for the Brant Haldimand Norfolk Catholic District School Board, and then 1 for each of the French Public and French Separate School Boards. Next slide. With that, I'd like to introduce, with my pleasure, Councillor John Utley. So John immigrated to Canada in 1970, plying his trades as a general machinist. His career included Corig Eagle Technologies, managing machine operations, chair of the technical programs at Mohawk College, Brantford, and then ran his own business in adult training and business consulting. At Westcast Industries, offered John a position. He was assigned to key positions in Brantford, Strathroy, Stratford, Cordelia, Georgia. So I'm sure I probably even pronounced that one wrong. But after Westcast, John operated his leadership development and consulting business before deciding to run into public office. So this decision was strongly influenced by his extensive community involvement, which included Kiwanis Club of Brantford, he's the past president, initiated a business case for a hospice by joining the Willett Hospital Board, VON Board, BGH, Pain Management Committee, Kids Can Fly as a founding member in the chair, Brant United Way for 12 years, Rotary Club Sunshine honorary member, and John also received the Queen's Jubilee Medal and Rotary Paul Harris Fellowship for his volunteer and community service. John is an active counselor and serves on many committees, including the Brantford Library Board, Finance, War Memorials and Cenotaph Working Group, and the Howitzer Cannon Project, Northridge Task Force, and the Downtown Brantford Improvement Task Force, and the list would go on and on. I've had the pleasure of working with John for a number of years, and so we've invited him to come to talk to you about a day in the life of a counselor. Thanks again, Councillor Utley.
Thank you very much, Tanya. You've taken about 3 minutes off my my presentation. So anyway, welcome everybody. I'm glad that you came out tonight to find out what's involved in running for municipal office. So I asked myself when I first ran, what do I have? What does it take to run a city of a multi-million-dollar city with approximately 200 services, each with their own level of complexity? And each one of us who puts our name forward, we have our own reasons why we want to make a difference to our community. We want to participate more fully in the community and be in a position of making decisions for the citizens of our community. So I was very fortunate having careers in the auto manufacturing sector, adult education, running my own leadership development business. And these experiences helped me understand the needs of local businesses and how my role on council can be put to good use. I was very interested in the financial side of the city and also business development, attracting new businesses to our city. Also have extensive community service, which Tanya has went way into more detail than I wanted to. But anyway, all those things, a combination of all the volunteer work, really made me better understand the needs of our community and those that are less fortunate than we are. So what made me decide to run for office? My wife and I helped former councillor and Mayor Mike Hancock with his election and re-election campaigns for over 20 years. Mike was a big influence on my decision to run for councillor in Ward 2, and I was fortunate to inherit a seasoned campaign team. Having the support of your partner is even more important, as there are many evening meetings and public events to attend. Identifying key issues in the ward and city was important in answering questions at the door. These key issues can help you with your campaign materials and the platform on which you decide to run. My team was critical in helping me with my campaign materials and strategies to get elected. Going door to door, meeting people was enjoyable and educational, and at times grueling if the weather was hot and humid. You can plan on walking approximately 150 miles and losing 10 or more pounds in the process, which isn't too bad. And then through hard work and determination, I came first in all 3 elections between 2010 and 2018. And I can tell you there are no shortcuts to success. So 2, you receive enough votes to win and you're elected. Once elected, you will be immediately immersed in setting the 2023 budget. And if you have no budget experience, you will probably find that challenging. Even if you have experience, I found it still very challenging. All those elected to council will be assigned or volunteer to be on numerous committees, boards, task forces, and working groups. You and your ward mate can decide who sits on what committee. You will receive copious amounts of reading materials, which you will be expected to ask questions on or comment on. So be prepared for your meetings. And I have to thank the clerk's department for providing all that paper to us. Much of it comes in electronic form now. I highly recommend visiting every department in the city so that you get an overview of each service the city provides. Staff are very knowledgeable and helpful in helping you understand their operations. And those responsible for each department will help you answer constituent concerns. Be prepared to answer or follow up on every question or concern imaginable. And I'll give you a few gruesome details here, from a disemboweled cat to vicious dogs, roaches, rowdy or noisy neighbors, drug houses, voodoo, speeding cars, and everything in between. And just when you think you've heard it all, something new pops up, I guarantee you. So those who voted for you will have huge expectations of you right from the get-go. 3, council. You will be one of 10 councillors and a mayor, which makes up council. You're entitled to 1 vote. When you introduce a notice of motion for a resolution, make sure you do your homework and ask staff for their help with the wording. Then you need the support of your ward mate or another councillor or the mayor. Then you need to make a strong case to council on its merit and answer any objections that may be raised to get enough votes for that resolution to pass. Working with your ward mate is very important, even if you may disagree at times. No matter what you do, there will always be those who criticize or support your initiative. It's a constant. It's amazing how many citizens who think they know how to run a city more than you do. And then for every person that you make happy, there will be a corresponding person who will disagree. And you learn this at a very early stage. Responding to citizen concerns in a timely manner is important. Maintain a log to keep track of and reply to citizen issues and problems. This can be very hectic with some issues. All in all, I've very much enjoyed being a councillor over the past 11.5 years and helping people with their issues. The job can be very rewarding most times. Sometimes circumstances can prevent someone being helped with their issues for a number of different reasons. So you try your best no matter what the outcome, and that's all you can really do. I wish you all good luck with your campaigns and leave you with this message. Whatever you put into something, there should be a corresponding return on your efforts. Thank you for listening. We have a few minutes left, I think, and I will try and answer any questions related to your interest in being a councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Utley, I'm not seeing any questions submitted, but maybe I'll just ask one. Do you have in your term a memorable moment where you just felt so good about your decision to run for council? Is there something that sticks out in your career?
Oh, there are a number of ones as a councillor. My first ever resolution was a children's memorial on Brant Ave at I believe it's St. Andrew's Park. And the history behind that memorial, there's 2 hands, 2 arms reaching up to the sky. And the inlays in that memorial were designed and embedded in the memorial itself. So every person that lost a child, no matter if the child was just weeks or hours old, or the child may be 60 and the mother or father may still be alive, there's still a child in their minds. That's one. My biggest thing I'm most proud of is introducing continuous improvement into the city, and it took a long time to get staff and leadership team convinced of that, probably because they did not have any experience themselves. So I asked Darrell Lee at the time, tell me something that you've improved in the last 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. And he told me something, and I said, that is continuous improvement. So the light went on at that point, and I think now we're fully embedded with continuous improvement and all the offshoots of lean and so on. So we still got a way to go yet, but you start off, you can't run before you walk. So I think we're just managing that very slowly, surely, and effectively. And then one of the other ones is the streamlining of the building development application process. So we're really doing well with that. And of course, the clubhouse at the Walter Gretzky Golf Course was something very near and dear to my heart, especially with my good friend Walter Gretzky, being having that golf course named after him, and now in his memory. There's probably a few others out there, but they're the few. I mean, of course, I absolutely love working with staff. You've been absolutely amazing with the way you've helped me over the years, and I couldn't have done much of what I have done without your help. So a huge thank you to all staff in the city. It's been absolutely honor working for my community and for the city and making our city a better place. It's always a work in progress.
Thank you so much, Councillor Utley. I know that our time is both in this session coming to a close and your term of council, but I have your book right here on my desk.
Oh, okay.
And I keep it by my
Lovely.
side, just about that leadership that you have given from that council table and then into the staff's involvement. So again, thank you for your time today. No questions came in, so I got to just ask my own question of you. But again, thank you for joining us. And then Keaton's going to introduce our next speaker.
Appreciate you standing in there for me, Tanya. Really appreciate it. Have a good evening, everyone. Good night.
All right. Thank you very much to Councillor Utley. As Tanya said, I'm very excited to present or introduce our next presenters, Carol Suave and Jennifer Kostraya from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, who will deliver our next presentation.
All right, I'm going to start. My name is Carol Sauvé, and as you've said, attending along with me is Jennifer Kostraya, and we're from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So first, we'd like to thank the City of Brantford for inviting us and for hosting this candidate and third-party advertiser information session. Next slide, please. So these slides are meant to be a summary of some of the sections and should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we're not lawyers and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. We will not be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but we hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and the legislation, and it improves your comfort level. So congratulations for taking an interest in your community and in local government, whether you're interested in serving on a municipal council or on a school board or registering as a third-party advertiser. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines some of the topics you want to cover during this session. The roles of elected members of council, head of council, and municipal staff, as well as the role of the school board trustee. The nomination process and how a candidate withdraws a nomination. Also, what happens if a candidate files a nomination, then changes his or her mind about which office they wish to run for. We're going to give you some key dates. Who is eligible to run for municipal office and school boards and who isn't. General campaign rules and election finances, so campaign spending limits, contribution limits, campaign expenses, borrowing, what expenses are exempt from the spending limit, finance surplus and deficit, financial reporting at the end of the campaign period. We're also going to look at compliance audits initiated by an application, penalties, general information about the voters list and rules about proxy voting, rights of scrutineers at the poll, recounts, and finally, we're going to give you some resources so where you can find information. Next slide, please. So you're considering running for a municipal office. Local government is the level of government that is closest to the people and is the most accessible and responsive to the needs of the community. You've made a decision to throw your hat in a ring, or you're thinking about it and you're curious to know how to go about it. So perhaps it's something you've always wanted to pursue, or you want to make a difference, or you're not happy with some of the decisions that have been made, or you have a passion for politics. Regardless, it's a 4-year commitment that will be filled with challenges, excitement, disappointments, hard work, and a great deal of satisfaction. Ontario municipal governments deliver local services while the province establishes the legislative and policy framework. So the Ontario government sets the standards for many local services, such as land use planning, building regulation, and social housing, and the province provides funding to municipalities for delivery of some services. The ministry also works in partnership with the municipal sector to support efficient and responsive local governments that are sustainable and investment ready. Local government is a challenging environment with high expectations and limited resources. You're doing more with less. There is a limited understanding of roles of council and staff, and government is just not like other business. You can't make everyone happy, so council must make difficult decisions in the best interest of the municipality. So before we get into an overview of the Municipal Elections Act, we wanted to provide a brief summary of the role of elected municipal officials and the role of staff. So please note that the information about the role of council and staff and accountability and transparency can also be found in the Councillor's Guide on the ministry's website. So this guide is an excellent tool that can provide you with a lot more information about how municipalities operate and how council and staff can work together in the best interest of the municipality. Next slide, please. So Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction. And each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. The Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities which seeks to balance local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. The key to any organization, government, business, industry, or local service club is for everyone to understand their respective roles and relationships. In the next few slides, we're going to review the role of the mayor's role as the chief executive officer, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff, which are all key to an efficient and effective and efficient local government. Next slide, please. So Section 224 of the Municipal Act states that it is the role of council to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, to develop and evaluate the policies and programs of the municipality, and determine which services the municipality provides. It also ensures that administrative and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council. So it ensures the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality. It also maintains the financial integrity of the municipality and carries out the duties of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. So examples of other acts are the Planning Act, the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Those are three of the more familiar pieces of legislation, but there are numerous other acts that also have sections that apply to municipalities. Next slide, please. So it's also the role of council to conduct meetings and pass bylaws. Council develops policies with respect to accountability and transparency, notices, delegation of authority, hiring, disposition of sale of land, procurement of goods and services, relationships, the relationship between council and staff, protection of tree canopy, natural vegetation, pregnancy leaves, and parental leaves. Those are just some examples. This is done as a collective group with all members each having one vote. Next slide, please. So Section 225 of the Municipal Act states that it is the role of head of council to act as the chief executive officer, to preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently, and effectively, to provide leadership to council, to provide information, recommendations to council on policies, practices, procedures, to ensure transparency and accountability, to represent the municipalities at official functions, and carry out the duties of the head of council under the Municipal Act. So basically, the role of the head of council is to act as a leader. The head of council is the chair of the meetings of council and the public face of the municipality. Next slide, please. So as the chief executive officer of the municipality, the head of council shall uphold and promote the purposes of the municipality, promote public involvement, act as the representative, and promote the municipal locally and elsewhere. The head of the council participates in and fosters activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. So although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, this might be confusing to people with a business background. The head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters during a council meeting. The head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. So it's important to note that council makes decisions, not an individual council member, including the head of council. So to clarify, the head of council always has a vote. There is sometimes confusion on this point in the media and with the public who think that the head of council can only vote in the case of a tie. So another clarification regarding voting, refraining from voting counts as a no vote. This is spelled out specifically in legislation in the case of recorded votes. A tie loses, so the result is the same as having voted no. I'm going to hand over the next slides to my colleague Jennifer.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the staff role. So the role of the staff is set out in section 227 of the Municipal Act. This would include implementing council's decisions and establish administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decisions, undertake research and provide advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, and carry out duties required by legislation or other duties assigned by the municipality. A key feature of effective and efficient councils is a well-developed understanding of the council-staff relations and the role of each party. The Councillor's Guide provides a list of ways that council members can assist staff to meet council's expectations. Some examples include having a policy requiring comprehensive job descriptions for all staff, providing clear policy decisions, directions, and expectations, adopting policies that complement and reinforce the staff efforts, consulting with staff before deciding on policies, and being prepared for council meetings. Staff in turn should provide well-organized agendas with supporting materials, provide sufficient timely information and analysis to make council's decision-making easier, notify council of changes to legislation or programs, provide advice on policy, including options and recommended actions, identifying the costs and benefits for the community in human and financial terms, notifying council immediately of any unintended or unexpected impacts of policy decisions, and implementing council's decisions as effectively and professionally as possible. As you know, there are some municipal staff positions that have statutory obligations, such as being the clerk, treasurer, chief building official, and fire chief. So it's important that council does not interfere with the statutory obligations of these roles. So for example, the clerk and treasurer positions have statutory duties or responsibilities assigned to them under the Municipal Act or other pieces of legislation. The Building Code Act would define statutory duties for the chief building official, and the Fire Prevention and Protection Act would define the statutory duties for the fire chief. Next slide, please. And the role of the Chief Administrative Officer, or the CAO. So section 229 of the Municipal Act stipulates that a municipality may appoint a chief administrative officer who shall be responsible for A, exercising the general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring the efficient and effective operation of the municipality, and B, performing such other duties that are assigned by the municipality. So the function of the CAO within the municipality is akin to the role of a chief executive officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operation of the municipality. So to help you understand the role of the CEO in the municipality, we like to picture an hourglass. So council is at one end and all of the municipal staff and department heads are at the other. The CAO would be the middle or the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass would flow through. So if council wants to give direction to a specific department, the communication would flow through the CAO. And likewise, if a department wants to give information, reports, etc. to council, it would flow through the CAO. Next slide, please. Actually, that was, I think we're back on the staff council relationship roles. That one, yes. So the counselor's guide provides some very useful information on how council and staff can work together. This slide provides you with a high-level overview of the relationship. Councils and their administration have different roles within the municipality, but their roles have common goals and purposes. In general, it is the role of the elected council to represent the community and set the direction and policy for the municipality. And it is the role of staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. Council generally sets the policy direction for the municipality, and staff provide the research, the expert advice to help council in their decision-making process. Once council makes a decision, staff generally has the responsibility to implement the policy of council, for example, through administering and delivering the services and programs to the community. Staff and council rely on one another to move the municipality forward. Both staff and council provide leadership. Council provides political leadership, while administration provides leadership to the organization. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected, and it is important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so that they can serve the public in an effective and efficient manner. Municipalities are required to adopt a policy on the relationship between members of council and municipal staff. The municipalities have the flexibility to determine the content of those policies. Next slide, please. The representative role. So the next few slides will provide a bit more information on each of the roles of council as described in the counselor's guide. So the representative role, so in that role as a representative, you were elected by the constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents may have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent all of them all of the time. For many issues, you will have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that will not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on what interests of the based on the best interests of the municipality as a whole. So in practice, there is no single correct approach to the representative role. And on many issues, you may find that you fall somewhere between the two opposing viewpoints. Be sure to familiarize yourself with any policies or protocols that your municipality may have in place regarding the handling of complaints and citizen inquiries. Although you may want to find some ways of helping, remember to consult municipal staff. If your municipality doesn't already have a complaint policy, council may want to consider adopting one. Furthermore, there may be circumstances where decisions are made by designated staff that operate at arm's length from the municipality, and where it could be inappropriate for an elected official to interfere or to be seen as interfering. Examples of this would include decisions made by the fire chief, the chief building official, or the medical officer of health. So a councillor who has made promises that cannot be kept may lose credibility with the citizens and strain the working relationships with staff. As I mentioned before, each individual council member has one vote when making decisions. Every member of council should vote on matters in the best interest of the municipality as a whole. and every member should respect each other's points of view during and after debating an issue at the council table. Once a decision is made by council, it is a decision of the municipality, and staff are required to carry out, implement that decision. Next slide, please. So policy making role. So some council decisions are routine. Others establish general principles to help guide further actions. Those are often considered policy decisions. Some policies can be specific, such as a bylaw requiring dogs to be kept on leashes or public areas, and others can be broader or more general, such as the approval of an official plan. So how is policy made? So when we look at the slide outlines the general process taken during the policy-making role. So the Counselor's Guide does provide a lot of detail on the policy-making process, but I'll provide a high-level overview. You start by identifying the issue. So as Council, you agree on what the issue is and what the objectives are. Council would then direct staff to research the issue further and identify and recommend options to Council. There may be a need to consult with the public and consider their feedback. Council would then review staff information and consider factors such as demands on time to implement the policy and any cost implications, etc. Council makes a decision on the best course of action and adopts the policy. From there, staff is directed to implement the policy. After the policy is implemented, Council would work with staff to evaluate the policy and make any amendments that may be required. In practice, policy making is sometimes less ordinary than what appears on the slide because of various factors, such as oftentimes there is a rapid changing environment, the issues facing you could be complex, or it could be difficult to single out problems that require more immediate attention. There could be differing and sometimes strongly held views by stakeholders and members of the public. There could be a lack of time to identify all possible alternatives and to conduct detailed research and analysis. There could also be legal and financial implications limiting what Council may do. And the implementation of the policy, along with the establishment of monitoring and evaluating mechanisms, may be very complex. To recap, Council is the primary policy-making body of the municipality, while administrative staff is responsible for carrying out council's policy decisions. The two roles are distinct, but there can be much overlap. Although staff is responsible for implementing a policy, Council may wish to develop appropriate reporting mechanisms to help ensure that the policies are being carried out as intended and as effectively as possible, and so that Council can follow implementation progress. Next slide, please. So the stewardship role. So Council's objectives are to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. There is a fine line between Council's overall stewardship of the municipality and the administration's management of day-to-day activities. Generally, Council monitors the implementation of its approved policies and programs, but the practical aspects of its implementation and administration are a staff responsibility. Essentially, the day-to-day operations of the municipality are left up to staff. To be effective in the stewardship role, Council may wish to have processes in place to ensure that policies adopted by Council are being implemented, staff are administering services and programs as Council intended, rules and regulations are being applied correctly and consistently, and funds are being spent only as authorized, and the municipality's resources, financial or otherwise, are being used appropriately and as efficiently as possible. Establishing and following such policies and guidelines helps Council leave the day-to-day details for staff to manage. Council is then free to deal with exceptional situations, ensure that policies are current, and listen to issues raised by the public to represent the broader community interest. Before Council can monitor and measure the municipality's administrative effectiveness and efficiency, it may wish to become familiar with policies currently in place. With input from municipal staff, Council can determine whether the policies are functioning well or if changes are necessary. Next slide, please. Accountability and transparency. So part 5.1 of the Municipal Act, we talk about Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislated accountability and transparency framework that includes rules for the municipality and rules for members of council and local boards. So ensuring accountability and transparency is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act and is a priority of maintaining public trust. Councillors are of course accountable to the public as elected officials. However, it is also important that procedures and policies are clearly set out and accessible, and that the day-to-day operations of the municipality are transparent. Go to the next slide, please, and talk about code of conduct. So code of conduct is usually set out expectations and standards for councillor conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of the council's terms. With the growing importance of accountability and integrity, more municipalities have adopted codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. Some have also adopted their procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of those members. Municipalities are required to establish codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which must include certain subject matter. These would include gifts, benefits, and hospitality, respectful conduct, including towards officers and employees of the municipality or of local boards, how to handle confidential information, and the use of municipal or local board property and equipment. So I'm going to pass it back over to Carol.
Thank you.
To talk about accountability officers.
So next slide, please. So codes of conduct and integrity commissioners. Municipalities are required to provide access to an integrity commissioner. So an integrity commissioner operates independent of council and reports to council with respect to the application of a code of conduct of members of council and local boards. Procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members of council and local board. So the integrity commissioner's function may also include providing advice and education about the code and other ethical rules to members of council and the public, as well as conducting inquiries into requests from council or a local board, a member of council or a board, or a member of the public about whether a member of council or local board has contravened the applicable code of conduct. Hope you all got that. If the integrity commissioner reports that, in their opinion, a member of council has contravened the code of conduct, the municipality may impose a penalty in the form of a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period of up to 90 days. It's up to the municipality to decide how to proceed after the integrity commissioner's report. So to help ensure integrity and accountability in public office, the Municipal Act provides municipalities with authority to appoint certain integrity and accountability type officers. So these include a municipal ombudsman. So this officer's function is to investigate in an independent manner decisions and recommendations made and actions done or omitted in the course of the administration of a municipality, local boards, or certain municipal corporations as the municipality specifies. So this is a separate office from the Ontario Ombudsman, who also has a role with respect to municipalities. So another officer that can be appointed is an Auditor General. This Auditor General may assist council in holding itself and municipal administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and achieving value for money in municipal operations. The Auditor General must also perform his or her duties in an independent manner. The Auditor General's responsibilities do not include the responsibilities of the municipal auditor. So municipalities may also, if they wish, appoint a lobbyist, registry and registrar, and a registration system such as establishing a code of conduct for lobbyists and prohibiting former public office holders from lobbying for a specified time period. Next slide, please. So the Ontario Ombudsman has a role with respect to municipalities. This role builds on the local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. This role is in addition to the Ontario's Ombudsman role as the default meeting investigator for municipalities that have not appointed a local meeting investigator. The Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received or on the Ombudsman's own initiative. So although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to council and a municipality as part of the report. It is up to the municipality whether and how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. So it is up to the Ombudsman how to respond to complaints. So for example, the Ontario Ombudsman's practice is to investigate complaints made to local integrity officers. So for example, to the municipality's local ombudsman, only after the local complaint processes are completed. So the Ontario Ombudsman does not replace locally established complaint mechanism or act as an integrity commissioner for municipalities. Local integrity officers and municipal codes of conduct are an important part of Ontario's local accountability framework. So certain local boards, for example, the Police Services Board and Children's Aid Societies, may be exempted from the Ontario Ombudsman's oversight. If you want more information on that, we recommend you look at Ontario Regulation 114.15 under the Ombudsman's Act and the legislation generally. And if you want more information on the Ontario Ombudsman, including its processes, please see the Ombudsman's Act and the Ontario Ombudsman's website. Next slide, please. So, privacy and confidentiality. Personal privacy and other confidential issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councillors and staff. So the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out the rule for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. So according to these rules, councillors and staff in most circumstances protect personal privacy and only collect, use, and disclose personal information in accordance with those rules. So for example, depending on circumstances, councillors and staff may or may not be authorized to obtain personal information in the course of their duties. So this might mean that at times, councillors could not obtain this kind of information from staff. So municipal freedom of information legislation also regulates confidential information of other kinds. So that's in addition to personal information. And other laws, including local bylaws, regulate personal and other kinds of confidential information. So councillors who may have received personal or other confidential information in the course of their duties will have related responsibilities, such as protecting and safeguarding the information. Councillors may wish to check with municipal staff about appropriate measures and the municipality's practices. So for example, providing for physical security to help prevent unauthorized disclosure or loss of confidential information. Next slide, please. So the role of the school board trustee. So the Education Act creates 4 different kinds of school boards. You have the English language public district school boards, which governs the provision of elementary and secondary English language instruction in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools. You've got the English language separate district school boards that govern the provision of elementary and secondary English language instruction in Roman Catholic separate schools. You also have the French language public district school boards that govern the provision of elementary and secondary French language instruction in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools. And finally, you have the French language separate district school boards that govern the provision of elementary and secondary French language instruction in Roman Catholic separate schools. So school trustees are members of the school board. They're locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. So only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions and or concerns about their local school. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about duties, commitments, and etc. Next slide, please. So basically, the role of school board trustee is to establish policy direction, to participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. And school board trustees are accountable to the constituents, the Ministry of Education, and to families. So I'm going to hand over to Jen the next slides.
Okay, so the next slide, please. So municipal office eligibility and ineligibility. You must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as eligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day that you are nominated, you are qualified to hold the office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold office. So then please note that the municipal clerk is responsible for setting up and running the voting places used in a municipal election. The clerk must comply with any provincial or local public health measures that are in effect and may also put in place additional procedures that they consider necessary for conducting the election. If you have any questions about public health and safety at the polling place, you should contact your municipal clerk. If a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. Section 30, subsection 4 of the Municipal Elections Act states, if elected, he or she shall be deemed to have resigned from the employment immediately before making the declaration of office. Section 30 of the Municipal Elections Act states that a person shall not be considered an employee for this section by reason only of being a volunteer firefighter as defined in the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. An employee of a municipality who wants to run for an office in a different municipality doesn't have to take a leave of absence or resigns, but they should check with their employer to see if there are any policies that could affect them. Next slide, please. Talking about school board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. So questions about the school board should be directed, or eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. It's important to note that if you are an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any school board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. The following people are disqualified from being elected as school trustees: a clerk, deputy clerk, treasurer, or deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board, any person not eligible to vote in the municipality, and any employee of a school board unless they take an unpaid leave of absence and resign if elected. Also, like the ineligibility for municipal office, a judge of any court, a member of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, a senator, or a member of the House of Commons, an inmate of a penal or correctional institution under sentence of imprisonment. Next slide, please. Third-party advertisers. So a third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate in a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. A third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Next slide, please. So for eligibility and ineligibility of third-party advertisers, only the following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration: an individual who is normally a resident on Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, and a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. Ineligibility is, so this slide shows a list of the ineligible candidates for third-party advertisers. Regarding item number 5, any group or organization that is not a corporation, this includes groups like associations or clubs that are not incorporated. Next slide, please. The nomination process. So the first day for filing nominations was on May 1st, 2022. Note that if this was a Sunday, the clerk may have policies in place to permit electronic filing. Candidates may have to wait until Monday, May 2nd, 2022 to file their nomination. The last day and time for filing nominations for the 2022 elections is on Friday, August the 19th, 2022 by 2 p.m. And for clarification, the nomination filing fee is only refunded once the candidate submits a completed financial disclosure of all financial transactions made up to the date the nomination was withdrawn. Nomination day for the regular election is the 4th Friday in August in the year of the election. So for 2022, that would be August 19th, 2022. And withdrawal of a nomination. So local election policies may state a candidate must personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate is in the hospital or incapacitated, this may not be feasible. If a candidate withdraws a nomination if a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money or raised any funds, they can click on the box and sign the form that it's complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial auditor statements by the required deadline. An issue that is raised infrequently, but is of importance nonetheless, is what happens to a campaign which has been opened and a campaign decides to run for a different office. In the candidate's guide, the ministry has provided a few examples showing what happens when candidates change their mind about which office to run for after they've filed a nomination paper. The next slide, please. So starting on May 1st until the close of business on August 19th, 2022, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. May 1st is a Sunday. You may not be able to file your registration until May 2nd, 2022, when the clerk's office is open. Candidates must complete Form 1, which is the nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. And Brantford is a ward system. So as long as you're eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. And then please note that in addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk may establish their own local processes and procedures relating to submitting a nomination. So it's important to contact the clerk so that you understand the process in that municipality. Next slide, please. So the 25 signatures required. So municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on Form 2. The Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides an exemption to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. And then please note that the requirement for nominations to sign nomination forms does not apply to school board candidates. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements for a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just the ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could be accountable under the penalties section of the Municipal Elections Act. So as a tip, if the candidate wishes, they can provide more than 25 signatures. Candidates should remember that even if electronic filing is permitted, they are required to obtain 25 original signatures endorsing their nomination where applicable, and to keep those until after the next regular election, which would be 2026. Next slide, please. So running for a different office. So occasionally a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can run for only one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use those endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and one or both offices is or are elected by a ward, the two campaigns must keep separate and two financial statements must be filed. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Carol.
Thank you, Jen.
You're
Next
welcome.
slide, please. So registration of third-party advertisers. Individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertisers. There is no registration fee for third-party advertisers. So a third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per section 88.6, subsection 1. And this states an individual, corporation, or trade union may in person or by an agent file with the clerk of the municipality responsible for conducting an election a notice of registration to be registered third party for the election, and the notice must be filed in the prescribed form and must include a declaration of qualification signed by the individual or by a representative of the corporation or trade union, as the case may be. So section 88.6 subsection 2 notes that a notice of registration may only be filed with the clerk of a local municipality. Once registered, they may advertise in support of or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in that municipality. So this would include council, trustee, and directly elected upper tier candidates. To advertise regarding questions on the ballot will require registration as a third-party advertiser. So for a regular election, the registration cannot be filed earlier than the first day for filing nominations and cannot be filed later than the Friday before voting day during the clerk's office hours. So section 88.6 subsection 3 notes that once the clerk certifies the notice of registration, the individual, corporation, or trade union is a registered third party for the election. So third party advertising is geographically based and is structured around the concept of influencing a specific set of voters in a specific location. So registering in the municipality where the third party advertiser hopes to influence votes allows flexibility to support or advocate against any candidate in that specific geography. If an individual wants to influence voters in more than one municipality, so for example, over, let's say, 3 municipalities covered in a specific school board trustee election, he or she would have to register in each of the 3 municipalities and conduct their activities as 3 separate campaigns. If the municipality is satisfied that there has been a contravention of the act, so advertising, let's say, in a restricted period, as well as the requirements therein, then it can ask the third-party advertiser to remove the advertisement or discontinue the advertising. Next slide, please. So third-party advertiser withdrawal. The third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. So this means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file their nomination. If a corporation or trade union is registered as the third-party advertiser, it would not be affected by a person filing a nomination, as the person would not be the same entity. A third-party advertiser and a candidate would need to be careful to distance their activities, as third-party advertising may not take place under the direction of a candidate. So the existing campaign finance rules would not change. Finances relating to third-party advertising campaign cannot be transferred to a candidate's campaign. The existing campaign finance rules would not change. A third-party advertiser who withdraws and closes their campaign cannot transfer that campaign to someone else. So to maintain financial transparency around third-party advertising campaigns, the financial statements of advertisers who end their campaign early should reflect their finances as of the day their campaign ended. The registration period for third-party advertisers runs until the Friday before voting day, which falls October 21st, 2022, or the last day the clerk's office is open before voting day in a by-election. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Are we, no, we're gonna.
Yep, we're just going to take
You're
a
gonna
short
take a break at this point? Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break and we'll be right back.
So it is 7:10. We're going to take about a 5-minute break and we'll restart again at 7:15. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It is now 7:15, and I think we're okay to proceed again.
Thank you. So just want to be sure. I just want to be sure of the slide we're on first. Registration of third party. So that's slide 40. 32. So, because we finished before at third party contributions. And I don't think we were, yeah, registration. That's slide 40. I think you're a little further into the, yeah, sorry about that. We'll just get it at the right spot. So it's before this. A little bit before still. It's a slide 33 actually. Do you see it? Third-party advertisers, yeah. Okay. So now we go to the, all right, so I think this is where we were at, if I'm not mistaken. If not, well, we'll repeat it ourselves. So, right, go to the next slide. I believe it's the next slide. So 34. So contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified. If one corporation controls the other directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. If the corporations are owned and controlled by the same person or group of persons, either directly or indirectly, they're considered to be the same person. No, I think I am going to apologize here.
Yeah, I think we were actually at the contribution. So the material I believe you're reading, it was the contribution slide. So we'll just the one that.
And my apologies on that. I'm going to go over that one. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Thank you.
All right. So we are on contributions, and these are important. Campaign accounts are only required if the candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So for acclamations and campaigns where no funds are raised or spent, there's no need for a campaign account. Trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. So third-party advertisers will generally need to follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financially reporting as candidates for office. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. This must be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. This will encourage accountability and transparency. So ensure that you're aware of the municipality's policy in this regard. The practice of municipalities of providing candidate contact information on their website is not a contribution. So generally speaking, the same contribution rules will apply to third-party advertiser campaigns as to candidates. So refer to both when the rule applies to both. Now the next slide. I'm going to repeat it because it wasn't very long. The contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person, and they count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified in that one corporation controls the other directly or indirectly, then they are, if that situation is, then they're considered to be the same contributor. If the corporations are owned or controlled by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they're considered to be the same contributor. Next slide, please. So volunteers, the value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. If a professional, let's say an accountant or a lawyer, volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer, and it is a campaign expense. So as mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jen at this point for the next slides.
Thank you, Carol. And continuing with contributions. So campaign contributions are monies, goods, or services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. Fundraising functions or events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name and address of the contributor and the amount and the date. Next slide, please. Contribution limit. So the limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200, except for in the City of Toronto mayoral candidates, in which case the amount is $2,500. The individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to the contributors. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about self-funding limits. So self-funding limits for municipal council candidates is based on the number of electors voting for the office to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. The formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council and $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for the other council offices. The highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is $25,000. If the formula works out to a number that is over $25,000, they still get the $25,000 limit. If the formula works out to less than $25,000, they get whatever the formula works out to. Next slide, please. Borrowing. So loans can only be borrowed from a bank or other recognized lending institution in Ontario and must be directed into the campaign account. Loans may only be guaranteed by the candidate or loans may only be guaranteed by the candidate or their spouse. Generally, the same borrowing rules apply to third-party advertisers. While candidates can open their campaign account with their own funds, the candidate cannot loan funds to his or her campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. The only way that a candidate can reclaim the startup amount is after the election campaign period ends and prior to filing the financial statements. The candidate or his or her spouse may be refunded any contributions from surplus. You cannot receive a loan from family members or from any corporate accounts that you may have access to. The loan isn't considered to be campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and the campaign does not repay all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since the guarantor is basically providing the campaign the means to repay the loan. Keep in mind the contribution limit for the candidate and spouse if borrowing. Any interest that the campaign pays on the loan is considered a campaign expense. Next slide, please. Campaign expenses. The following are considered campaign expenses: the replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and used in the current election, the value of contributions of goods and services, audit and accounting fees, interest on loans under Section 88.17, the cost of holding fundraising functions, the cost of holding parties and making other expressions of appreciation after the closing of voting. For a candidate, expenses relating to a recount or a proceeding under Section 83, and the expenses relating to a compliance audit. Expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third party of an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expense relates. And the cost of election campaign advertisements or third-party advertisements, as the case may be. For greater certainty, the cost of holding fundraising functions does not include costs related to events or activities that are organized for such purposes as promoting public awareness of a candidate and at which the soliciting of contributions is incidental, or promotional materials in which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. Next slide, please. Campaign expenses continued. Campaign and third-party advertisers should become familiar with campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf during his or her campaign or by a third-party advertiser during their campaign. The nomination filing fee is no longer an expense and is not included on the financial disclosure form. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses and must be reported. A receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only nominated persons and/or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during their campaign period. Payment of any campaign expense must be drawn from the campaign account, and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. All expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form to be filed with the clerk by the candidate or the third-party advertiser. With respect to campaign inventory, if you ran in the last election and want to use leftover goods such as signs or office supplies, you have to determine what the current market value of those goods is and what it would cost if you were to purchase them today. These amounts are recorded as an expense. Conversely, if you end up with leftover inventory at the end of the campaign and it becomes your personal property, but if you want to store them to use in another election, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. Next slide, please. Should be spending limits. The spending limits formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 101/97. The clerk calculates the spending limits twice. So the first time, upon a candidate's filing the nomination form, the clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed on September 15th, 2018. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list that exists on September 15th, 2022. Whichever number is higher is the spending limit, and the clerk's calculation is final. Next slide, please. Clerks will continue to provide estimates for the spending limits. Candidates will be required to inform their contributors of the contribution limits. So an example of this is how much a contributor can contribute to an individual candidate's campaign, and the aggregate limit on contributions to any one council or local board election. The spending limits to be provided by September 25th. If a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limits. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. So example, subject to the same contribution limits and have the same calculated spending limits. This includes financial filing requirements, requests for extensions, and records. Third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contributions and expenses are tracked and accounted for. Proper record retention, proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses or accepting contributions on their behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. Next slide, please. So expenses that are not subject to the spending limits. So most expenses are subject to the spending limit. Those listed in the slide are not. So expenses relating to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. Similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information to make campaign contributions doesn't qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit if incurred before voting day are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. I'm going to pass it back to Carol.
Thank you, Jen. Next slide, please. So third-party advertisers spending limit. So third-party advertisers will be subject to two spending limits: a general spending limit and a separate limit for expenses relating to parties and expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. So Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides the following formula for calculating third-party spending limits. So it's $5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of $25,000. The formula used is based on the number of electors entitled to vote in an election in the municipality. The Municipal Elections Act also provides that the spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day be set at 10% of the general spending limit. So this would be consistent with the spending limit in place for candidates. Next file, please. Next slide. So campaign finance rules. As a candidate or a third-party advertiser, it's important that you be fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. So a question we're asked each municipal election is whether there's a requirement for every candidate to have a chief financial officer. The answer is no. We suggest that you familiarize yourself with sections 88.8, so 88 subsection 8 to 88 subsection 21 of the Municipal Election Act, and also the financial statements that you'll be required to file. So this will help you guide you in organizing your records and how they have to be reported. You are required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records and open a campaign bank account if you're spending any money or accepting any contributions. So again, I think we've said that before, but a bank account is not required if a candidate or third-party advertiser doesn't receive or spend money. Next slide, please. So candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contribution and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all campaign financial records until after November 15, 2026, when a new council takes office at that point. So these rules apply whether you're elected or not. Just a little tip here, the pass the hat donations that are under $25 may be given anonymously, and you don't have to issue a receipt. This is a campaign income that is not considered to be a contribution, and the total amount received must be reported as such on a campaign financial statement. Next slide, please. So store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or his or her designee. So it's a good practice to have a receipt that is a multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially numbered. If you open a bank account, open one that provides monthly statements and canceled checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit, listing the names of the contributors and the amounts received from each. Maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses and obtain invoices to support all payments from the fund. So at any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the original amount of the petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by a check drawn on the campaign account in an amount equal to the total amount of the invoices. So candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look over Form 4, that's for candidates, and Form 8 for third-party advertisers. So look at those at the beginning of your campaign to give yourself an idea of what information will be needed to report on at the end of the campaign. It is a requirement under the Municipal Elections Act to maintain records to November 15, 2023 as well. Next slide, please. So the period for third-party advertisement, as shown on the slide, is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers applies. So in 2022, that's from May 1st, 2022, until the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. So note that third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. Next slide, please. So campaign advertisements continue. So the broadcaster or publisher of a third-party or candidate advertisement shall maintain records containing the following information for a period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears, and shall permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. So this should have the name of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, the name, business address, and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or publisher under the direction of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, a copy of the advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection, and a statement of the charge made for its appearance. Next slide, please. So Subsection 88, Subsection 25 of the Municipal Election Act states that all candidates are required to file Form 4 with the clerk, regardless of how much or how little they spent or fundraised. So if you filed a nomination form, you must file a Form 4, so the number 4. This form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or you were acclaimed. So if you registered as a third-party advertiser, you must complete Form 8. A candidate may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. The clerk is required to make public a report on which candidates filed financial statements and which did not. Next slide, please. So all contributions must be reported. The names of the contributors who contribute more than $100 must be reported on the financial statement. The clerk is required to make financial statements available to the public in an electronic format free of charge. So the appointment of an auditor by the candidate is mandatory if the expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. An auditor must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act 2004. So note that campaign statements are public documents. Next slide, please. So candidates can file their financial documents at any time after voting day right up to January 3rd. So this has been adjusted from December 31st as it falls on a Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expenses incurred. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligation and publish that report on the municipal website or in another electronic form. So this needs to be done by April 30th in the case of a regular election or with 90 days of a by-election. So clerks can determine the conditions for the electronic filing of financial statements. I'm going to hand over the next slides to Jennifer.
Thank you, Carol. So continuing with financial, the nomination fee is only refundable if the financial statement is filed on time. A candidate third-party advertiser who misses the filing deadline may file within the 30-day grace period, provided a $500 late filing fee is paid to the municipality. So please note, a candidate who chooses to file within the 30-day grace period will be subject to both the $500 late filing fee as well as the loss of their nomination refund. A candidate third-party advertiser may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. Next slide, please. A surplus. So when filing the financial statement, a candidate or third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. Prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if an individual, made to the campaign, but not to anyone else. The amount that may be refunded is the lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the candidate and/or the third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. If neither the candidate nor third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it becomes the property of the municipality or the school board. Next slide, please. A compliance audit. So every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. Members of a compliance audit committee cannot be members of the council or school board, an employee, a candidate in the election, or a registered third-party advertiser. Clerks are to review contributions and to prepare a report for consideration by the compliance audit committee if a contributor appears to have exceeded any contribution limits. This process is related to reviewing contributions as reported on the financial statements and is not connected to the compliance audit process. If it is apparent to the clerk that a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee, which would meet to determine whether to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify what details are to be provided in the report to the committee. Electors entitled to vote in an election may apply for a compliance audit even if the candidate has not filed a financial statement. The application must be in writing and set out the electors' reasons for why they believe the Municipal Election Act was contravened. The application must be submitted to the municipal clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of the filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee will consider the application and decide whether to retain an auditor to undertake a compliance audit of the candidate's financial return. Next slide, please. The Compliance Audit Committee is required to provide brief written reasons for its decision. The Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. Electors can apply for a compliance audit of a third-party advertiser's campaign finances. The minister has the authority to make a regulation setting out qualifications for compliance audit committee members. Subsection 88.33, Section 8, the written reasons for the committee's decision shall be given to the candidate, the clerk with whom the candidate filed his or her nomination, the secretary of the local board, if applicable, and the applicant. If the audit occurs, the report must be circulated to the same individuals. The Compliance Audit Committee considers the auditor's report. If the compliance audit determines that there has been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to proceed with legal action. Decisions of the committee may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Elections Act may proceed with legal action without having first obtained a compliance audit. Next slide, please, where we're going to talk about offenses. So Section 90, subsection 2, an offense is described in subsection 3 that constitutes a corrupt practice, and a person who commits it is, on conviction, disqualified from voting at an election until the next regular election has taken place after the election to which the offense relates, in addition to being liable to any other penalty provided for this act. Subsection 3 says no person shall directly or indirectly A, offer, give, lend, or promise or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in connection with the exercise of non-exercise of an elector's vote. B, advance, pay, or cause to be paid money intending that it to be used to commit an offense referred to in clause A, or knowing that it will be used to repay money used in that way. Or C, give, procure, or promise or agree to procure an office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. D, apply for, accept, or agree to accept any valuable consideration or office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. E, give, procure, or promise to agree to procure an office or employment to induce a person to become a candidate, refrain from becoming a candidate, or withdraw his or her candidacy. Next slide, please. This is the penalties. So please refer to this chart, which provides the penalties for individuals, candidates, and third-party advertisers. Ineligibility to vote is a penalty if you are convicted of a corrupt practice. See the Municipal Elections Act in Section 90. Next slide, please. The voters list. So the preliminary list of electors, as corrected by the clerk, becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their names and information corrected or added to or removed from the voters list. The clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that the person has died. Section 23, the clerk shall not provide a copy of the voters list under subsection 3 or a part of the voters list under subsection 4 until September 1st. Next slide, please. Candidates running an award are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the names of the electors entitled to vote for that office. Next slide, please. The clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of the list to sign a receipt acknowledging the list is only to be used for election purposes and any other use would be in violation of the Municipal Elections Act. An elector's name shall appear only once on the list. In an award system, an elector is entitled to vote only in the ward where he or she resides. I'm going to pass it back to Carol.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So voting proxy, there's a number of reasons why someone would appoint someone else to vote on their behalf, including absence from the area or illness. That's some of the reasons. So Section 44 of the Municipal Election Act stipulates the issuance of proxy forms that no appointments until all the nominations are closed. So the clerk may designate a place and time for presentation of proxy voting application and appointment forms for clerk's certification. So this would be due on days of advance vote. The clerk's office or another location may be designated and open from noon to 5. Assignment of proxy vote is the responsibility of an eligible voter to appoint an identified eligible voter. An eligible proxy may exercise only one proxy vote, unless the proxy is acting on behalf of a spouse, sibling, parent, child, grandparent, or grandchild. Proxy forms must have original signatures. And please check with the municipal clerk if proxy voting is available, as municipalities that use alternate voting may not permit proxy voting. Next slide, please. So scrutineers. Only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election where voting takes place at a poll, the deputy returning officer is in charge of the activity in the voting place and may ask the scrutineer to leave if the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Candidates and scrutineers should respect that the deputy returning officer must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. So you can check with the clerk to see if a list of scrutineers' rights is being given to election staff at the poll. If so, you can use that list or prepare your own and hand out to each of your scrutineers a list of their rights, which are spelled out in section 47, subsection 5 of the Municipal Elections Act. Next slide, please. So a recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Councils and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of the results. Next slide, please. So these are key dates. Voting date is Monday, October 24, 2022, between 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And that's unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes or institutions, or council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. The campaign period, this is the time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses, runs from the date the nomination is submitted up until January 3rd, 2023. The campaign period, that's the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date the registration is certified, and the earliest date for that is May 1st, 2022, right up until January 3rd, 2023. The deadline for filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Friday, March 31st, 2023, no later than 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement, regardless of how much they spent or received in contribution. Next slide, please. So these are some resources. The first link will take you to the eLaws website, where all provincial legislation is available online, and that's including the associated regulations. So you will want to be familiar with the Municipal Elections Act 1996, the Municipal Act 2001, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and if you're running for school board, the Education Act. The second link is to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. So from this site, you can access the 2022 Voters Guide, the 2022 Candidates Guide, and the 2022 Third-Party Advertisers Guide. So a lot of your questions, you'll find the answers in those guides. They're really great. Once on the Municipal World website, if you click Bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office. They are available to purchase online. Final slide, please. So your municipal advisor for this region is Jane Parnell. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Jane. Jane, so Jane.Parnell, Parnell @ontario.ca if you have any questions. And that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol and Jennifer, for joining us and delivering that presentation. Very, very informative. I know we covered a lot at this point. If there are any questions, feel free for our attendees to put that in the question and answer. We'll give a couple moments. If not, like was mentioned, you can always reach out to Jane Parnell or our clerk's office for any further questions as they come. And we will wait a couple more moments, and then I think we can move on to our presentation on our sign bylaw. Okay, doesn't look like there's any questions at the moment, so I will pass on the speaking to Officer Jordan Tozer, who will go over our sign bylaw.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordan Tozer. I am a Senior Property Standards Municipal Law Enforcement Officer here with the City of Brantford's Bylaw Department. I'm glad I could be here tonight to help clarify and explain any legislation as it pertains to the upcoming municipal election. In our bylaw, election signs are defined. Do you want to go on the next slide? There we go. Election signs are defined in the bylaw as any image, words, sign, picture, notice, visual medium, or a device which is used by any on behalf of any political party, registered third party, or candidate for any election. This would be inclusive of any physical signs, stickers, buttons, shirts, vinyl on vehicles, brochures, or otherwise. This material is not to be used or distributed to anyone until after 2 p.m. On nomination day, which is August 19th, 2022. And next slide, please. So as shown on this slide, candidates and their representatives are permitted to enter any apartment and condo buildings, cooperative housing, gated communities, and you may not be refused access by any person in control of these properties, as long as it's between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a little excerpt from our sign bylaw, just outlines definitions and what is permitted and prohibited as previously spoken to. In addition to the requirement of waiting until 2 p.m. on nomination day, there are requirements on where you can actually place your election sign throughout the city. And next slide, please. So election signs may not be placed on any portion of city or public property. Staff here at the City of Brantford do reserve the right to remove any election signs that are placed on the city property. Under the sign bylaw, it does state that candidates may be responsible for any fees associated with having to remove and dispose of any illegally placed signs. This fee could be incurred on a per sign basis. For example, if there's a daylight triangle or a corner that has 3 candidate signs on it, the fee may be multiplied by 3. A daylight triangle, if you're not familiar with it, is a triangular area of land on a corner lot that is reserved for the maintenance of sight lines. So if you're at a stop sign looking to turn left or right, it's the portion of land that you're looking for your line of sight to see if it's safe to clear. Staff here at the City of Brantford is directed to proactively enforce and remove any signs that are in violation without any notice. That's it for me. I wish everybody the best of luck in the upcoming election. Thanks for having me tonight. Open to any questions you may have at this time. Otherwise, staff may circulate my contact info for any further questions or clarifications.
So I don't believe we have any questions, so you're good to go, Jordan. Thank you very much. All right, so we are almost done. Just hang tight, everybody. We just have a few more slides to go through, and we will try not to repeat anything that we have already gone over. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the municipal elections procedures and processes. As mentioned at the beginning, I'm Emma Vokes. I'm the supervisor of elections and business licensing. If you've already submitted your papers, I probably met you at the front counter. If not, I look forward to meeting you. Next slide, please, Keaton. So as you're aware, there are a few important dates for the upcoming election. I'm just going to touch on a few. This is available on our website. So obviously the first date was May 2nd, which was the opening day for nominations. So we've been in this just a little over a month. And the next important date is close of nominations, which is August 19th at 2:00 p.m. So if you're planning on filing your papers, you must be at City Hall by 2:00 p.m. on August 19th, which is a little bit different than all the other days because typically it's 4:30. The voters list will be made available on September 1st for all candidates. And then most importantly, election day is October 24th this year. Next slide. And I'll just walk you through the ward and poll map review. Next slide. Thank you, Keaton. So if you weren't already aware, the city of Brantford utilizes a ward system to divide the electors, and the city is broken into 5 wards. You're able to vote for 2 or less councillors in your ward, and the school board trustees and mayoral races are elected at large. This is just a brief synopsis of the population within the city of Brantford. And then we'll go through each ward. Like I said, they're broken down into 5 wards. Large maps are available for purchase through the clerk's department if you want to utilize them. We offer detailed maps at the cost of $1 per square foot or per square foot of printed map. So a 2x3 foot map would be $6. And maps can be requested through the campaign resources form found on the elections website, or you can also email us through the election@brantford.ca email. So we'll just go through, that's Ward 1, and then we have Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4, and last but not least, Ward 5, which is the downtown. So I'm going to pass it over to Keaton to do some nomination information.
Hi, everyone. We'll just go through the nomination information. I know this was covered quite in depth by Carol and Jennifer, so I'll try to focus on the Brantford specific elements. So we've put together packages for all candidates and third-party advertisers, and you're able to pick those up from City Hall. If you go through the lines, the doors with the lines, and go to our customer service desk, they are more than happy to provide you with the package you need. Inside the candidate and trustee package are all the required forms, your Form 1 and Form 2, as well as enough signature spots for 25 endorsements, your proper use of voters list, and your consent to release personal information. To note, again, trustees are not required to collect 25 endorsements. On the right-hand side of these packages are just some really key information. We have 2022 important dates, some one-pagers that give an overview of some of the legislation, including some that was covered tonight, our signed bylaws, access, candidate access to residential premises, new candidate advertising requirements, as well as some age-friendly campaigning information, the campaign request form, and the city map. For endorsement signatures, we want to make sure that when we submit those, they're all in proper order. So all endorsers, nominators must have a Brantford address. Please ensure that all the information is complete for each signature. And if a mistake is made, as it does happen, please do not use whiteout to cover the mistake. Have the signee bracket and initial the mistake and write the correction next to it. More endorsement forms are available online. As well, if you do pick up the package, you will have 25 spots. You're able to photocopy one of the pages if you do require more, but please don't photocopy any of the signatures, as they must be original endorsements. As mentioned numerous times, you have until 2 p.m. on August 19th, and we always recommend to file your nomination early, which gives you a time to address any issues. So if there is a signature missing, or perhaps there's only 24, the last thing you want is to find that out on August 19th at 1:30. So please try to get in as soon as you can. Just a quick review of what a valid endorsement looks like. John Doe has 2 endorsements here. As you can see, the first one, the municipality is Brant. Again, we need it to be Brantford. The endorser signed in the spot where the candidate's name should go, and a signature is missing. In contrast, the bottom is a acceptable endorsement. You can see that all the spots are filled out correctly and a signature is applied. For third-party advertisers, there's a package there at the front desk waiting for you as well. You will register using a similar process to candidates, and that registration period runs from May 2nd until October 21st. Once you come back in with your nomination papers and meet myself and Emma or any of the other clerk's representatives, we will provide a financial package. Inside that package is all the financial statements you need, your original financial statements, and then a subsequent expenses form. On the right-hand side, again, are just one-pagers that go over a bit of the legislation and provide more context. Including in that right-handed side is your certificate of preliminary maximum allowable campaign expenses and your allowable self-contributions to your own campaign. There's also some notice of penalties for refunds and candidates. The other nice thing about this package, when you do receive one, it is a great tool to collect receipts, as you will need to do that as you incur expenses. The nomination process in Brantford. So when you do arrive at City Hall, please come through the main doors where the two lions are. You'll go to the customer service desk. They'll let us know that you've arrived. We always want to make sure that a staff is available to accept your nomination. So please email us at election@brantford.ca to set an appointment. We are quite flexible, so we can usually work around your schedule, but it's nice for us to have a bit of a heads up that you're coming in. Please arrive with your documents filled out, but not signed, and we will need a piece of ID. A copy will be taken just to make sure that you are an eligible elector. We will do a review of all the package forms to make sure nothing is missing. And at this time, you will receive a financial package and you must pay your nomination deposit, $200 for mayor, $100 for councillor trustees. That will be returned when financial forms are submitted after the campaign period. This is a checklist that we complete in front of you with you while we go through your package documents to make sure that everything is in order and all the proper forms are submitted. Clerk staff and yourself will sign this form. We will make scans of the entire package and you will receive a copy while we retain the originals. Review, these are just very, very important things we cannot emphasize enough. You must be an eligible voter in Brantford in order to run. Your campaign cannot begin until your nomination forms have been filed. Please write your name on your nomination form as you want it to appear on your ballot. If you're a David who likes to or goes by Dave and that's how the community knows you, that's the name we want to see on that nomination form. Nomination forms must have original signatures, and it may be beneficial to obtain a few extra endorsements in the event that there's an eligibility issue. As well, nomination fee payments are accepted as cash, certified check, money order, or debit. I will now pass it off to my colleagues who will discuss the voters list.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So the online candidates portal is going to be available on September 1st. That is the way that we give candidates access to the voters list. You can request a paper copy, but as of September 1st, every candidate will have access to the online portal, and that will give you real-time updates. You can do it every 30 minutes, so that's the best option to do it. But as mentioned, you can request it through the city clerk's department. Next slide. This is just a reminder to make sure that you are registered as a Brantford voter and to encourage everyone that you know within the city of Brantford as well. Next slide. Thank you. So information service requests, we do have a form that you can fill out to the city clerk's department if you're, as mentioned, if you're requesting maps or paper copies of the voters list or information that's not publicly available to the public. So you can find that form on our website, or you can email that to election@brantford.ca. Next slide. And this is just an example of the form. Next slide, Keaton. All right, voting and polls. I promise we're almost done. I know everybody's probably getting tired by this point. We only have a few slides left. So we'll talk about voting and polls. Next slide. So our online voting, this will be the city's third election utilizing our online voting, which will run from October 3rd to October 24th. Voter cards will be mailed out to residents, and that will have all the information on it that residents will need to vote. Next slide. Advanced voting. So we do have our advanced voting period this year, or this election. It's going to run from October 12th to October 15th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's going to be held at 2 different locations, the Brantford Civic Center and the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center. Next slide. As well, on election day, we have roaming voting that is legislated through the Municipal Elections Act. So there are a few stipulations that we have to meet. In the city of Brantford, we're going to have 11 roaming polls to attend this year on election day. Next slide. And then at the polling station. So no campaigning or campaign materials will be tolerated at any polling station. Signs, shirts, advertisements, anything like that. And just keep in mind that the polling location isn't only limited to the inside of the physical building, but it also includes the parking lot, exterior, walkways, and everything surrounding the area. Next slide. Election day, the big day. So Monday, October 24th, 2022. I'm sure that's a day that it's ingrained in our memories for now. Voting places are going to be opened from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. I believe we have 24 voting locations on election day. Voters may vote at any location in their ward. Tabulation of results will commence immediately following the close of polls. Unofficial results will be displayed on the city's website throughout the evening, and the clerk responsible for the election will provide the official results as soon as possible after voting day. Next slide. And then we have the financials for the city of Brantford. So we don't accept electronic submissions. So paper copy must be filed at the city clerk's office in person and have original signatures. Next slide. And I think I'm going to pass it over to Tanya, the city clerk, just to give some closing remarks before we let you go for the night.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, team. So just a few resources on the page here. They can also be found on www.brantford.ca/elections. If you're looking for enhancing your knowledge even further than this session was able to provide you for tonight. Next slide. So our contact information. So the phone number for City Hall is 519-759-4150, or election@brantford.ca is an easy way to reach the management team. Next slide. And that is it for our evening. There's been a few questions that have come in across the session that we've been answering in real time. So thank you to our ministry reps and to the staff that have been helping support that. Generally, they were about when the copies of a material could be provided, when you could come and file, and costing. So hopefully across the presentation, we've been able to answer those questions and then re-solidify them in the chat. If there's anything, I'll just pause here for a moment in case there was any lingering questions that anyone had. And you're very welcome, Paul. Hope you did enjoy this session. Got a quick thank you across the chat system. So I'll take that as the way to positively end the evening and say again, thank you. And this was recorded, so it'll be put up on our city website as a resource in an event that you would like to review some of the language or what was provided tonight. Have a great night, everyone, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.